Let's begin with an uncomfortable truth that most of us spend our lives avoiding. What if the reason you haven't launched that business, executed that career pivot, or finished that creative project has absolutely nothing to do with laziness? What if your stagnation isn't a character flaw, but a triumph of biological engineering? Today, we are dismantling the myth of the stuck individual and looking at the cold, hard neuroscience of why our brains are literally wired to keep us exactly where we are.
It's a provocative starting point. We often hear the refrain, "It's not your fault, it's your brain." But there's a fine line between neurological understanding and simple self-exoneration. However, the data is becoming undeniable. The human brain is, at its core, a prediction machine. It prioritizes survival through familiarity. If you are stuck, your brain is actually succeeding at its primary job, keeping you in the safe, predictable zone of what it already knows.
Exactly. And we have to look at the specific mechanisms here. Neuroscience has identified 3 core pillars of this resistance, and they operate far below the level of conscious time management. The first is what researchers call an identity mismatch. This centers on the default mode network, or DMN. This is the cluster of brain regions responsible for your narrative self, the persistent story you tell about who you are. If your DMN is programmed with the story of a mid-level manager, it will perceive the actions of an entrepreneur as a foreign threat to the system's integrity.
That creates a profound internal friction. It explains why someone can have a goal they genuinely desire. They aren't conflicted about wanting it, yet they find themselves unable to move. The DMN is essentially running an old operating system. From a philosophical perspective, this echoes Heidegger's concepts of thrownness. We find ourselves in a world and self-definition we didn't necessarily choose, yet we are bound by its borders.
And the typical advice to just believe in yourself is neurologically hollow. The research suggests a far more clinical approach. You must choose to identify as the version of yourself that has already achieved the goal, not in the future, but as a present tense reality. This reorients the brain to start making predictions based on that new identity. It changes the internal prior of the predictive processing loop.
But let's be critical for a moment. To a rational person, say a 38-year-old professional, claiming to be an entrepreneur before they have a single customer feels like a delusion. It feels like a violation of objective truth. How do we reconcile that gap between the current reality and the intended identity?
The bridge is found in a fascinating biological analogy, the process of falling asleep. You don't wait until you are unconscious to lie down. You lie down, you close your eyes, you slow your breath. You perform the architecture of sleep until your brain makes it a physiological reality. Identity functions identically. You don't wait to feel like a drummer to pick up the sticks. You act like a drummer by practicing, and the action and identity grow in a symbiotic loop. You inhabit the form until the substance follows.
That leads us to the second pillar of stagnation, the fear of success. This isn't the cliché fear of having too much money or being too busy. It's a deeply rooted biological fear of visibility and the social cost of being truly seen. Especially as we get older, the stakes of failure involve more than just us. They involve colleagues, family, and our established reputation.
Right. Evolutionarily, being seen or standing out from the tribe was a high-risk move. The brain registers success not just as a reward, but as increased exposure to judgment and vulnerability. To combat this, researchers suggest a technique called taking it all the way to the end. You visualize the goal succeeding completely, then observe the specific fears that arise at the finish line. Is it the fear of criticism? The fear of being a fraud? By naming these fears, you transition the processing from the amygdala, the fear center, to the prefrontal cortex.
There is a literal seesaw relationship there. When the prefrontal cortex, the executive rational center, is activated through labeling and analysis, it exerts inhibitory control over the amygdala. Naming the fear isn't just a feel-good exercise. It's a strategic neurological dampening of the alarm system. Unnamed fears remain ambient anxieties that govern our behavior from the shadows.
The third pillar is perhaps the most insidious in the modern age, cheap dopamine. Even for those who consider themselves disciplined, those who aren't necessarily wasting hours on mindless entertainment, the dopamine trap is real. Dopamine doesn't care about your long-term legacy. It cares about the automation of immediate rewards. Every time you check a notification or seek a quick hit of validation, you are training your brain to prefer low-effort rewards over the high-effort, meaningful satisfaction of deep work.
It's the nutritional equivalent of snacking on sugar all day. By the time the real meal, your actual life's work, is served, you have no appetite for it. And the research on sleep is critical here. What you do at night dictates who you are in the morning. Cheap dopamine consumption before bed disrupts the natural dopamine reset during sleep. You wake up with a depleted baseline, meaning you start the day already lacking the chemical motivation required to tackle difficult tasks. The solution isn't just willpower, which is a finite resource. It's the strategic withholding of rewards. You have to train the brain that completion must precede comfort. You don't give yourself the reward, whether it's a purchase or a show, until the hard task is done. This recalibrates the reward system to associate effort with the dopamine spike.
This all points to a fundamental reality. This isn't about productivity tips. This is about perception. There's a famous study where kittens were raised in an environment with only horizontal lines. When they were later released into a normal world, they literally could not see vertical lines. They would walk straight into chair legs because their brains weren't wired to perceive them. We are the same. If our brains are wired for a specific limited identity, we will walk past opportunities every single day because we are neurologically blind to them.
That is the most humbling realization. You aren't missing opportunities because you're unlucky. You're missing them because your current wiring doesn't permit them to exist in your field of vision. But neuroplasticity tells us we can rewire. The process involves 3 steps. First, identify the core feeling you think the goal will provide: freedom, safety, accomplishment. Second, find where that feeling already exists in your life. Third, take immediate actions that generate that feeling today, rather than holding your happiness hostage to a future result.
It's about moving from a state of lack to a state of fullness. But we have to acknowledge the social friction. When you change your identity, you disrupt the expectations of everyone around you. There's a phrase for this: being misunderstood is the tax you pay for being authentic. If you are evolving, the people who invested in your old version will be confused or even resistant. That confusion isn't a sign of failure. It's a confirmation of growth.
Your brain is not your enemy. It is a powerful machine running an outdated program. Your default mode network is trying to keep you safe. Your fear is trying to protect you. Your dopamine habits are just patterns that once served a purpose. The question is no longer, how do I get motivated? The question is, will I consciously choose the story my brain predicts from, or will I remain a ghost in a machine I refuse to master?
You must be it before you can see it. The internal shift is the prerequisite for the external reality. Anything else is just rearranging the furniture in a burning house.
We leave you with this final, piercing inquiry. What identity are you still inhabiting? Perhaps one given to you by a parent, an old boss, or a younger version of yourself that has absolutely nothing to do with the titan you are capable of becoming. The cage door is unlocked. It always has been. You just have to stop identifying as a prisoner.